Today on the official Marvel podcast, the cast and crew of Marvel Studios Thunderbolts dish on the juiciest spoilers from the film.
There were definitely moments that I had as Bucky in this that felt reminiscent of the Winter Soldier days. And that was really fun for me to kind of wink at that.
And we'll hear from Thunderbolts composers Son Lux, Ryan Lott, Rafiq Bhatia, and Ian Chang.
And I can't explain to you the feeling of hearing a piece of music that you wrote played by 50 players in a room, just absolutely crushing it, and it's unbelievable.
Plus, we'll share everything you need to know about the comic book history of the Fantastic Four's lovable robot H.E.R.B.I.E.
I'm Victoria Yang.
I'm Raylo.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
Marvel Studios Thunderbolts is out in the world. And real quick, if you haven't seen it yet, this might be the time to cover your ears.
Or don't. Maybe go backwards and start with spoilers to get yourself hyped on the movie?
I mean, that's one way to do it. But just in case you don't want to learn what happens in the film, I guess, before seeing it, well, our own Yelena Belova says it best.
This is a spoiler warning.
You heard her. And when Yelena talks, we listen. The Thunderbolts, or should I call them the New Avengers, take us on one heck of a ride. And the film starts with an incredible stunt. Yelena, played by Florence Pugh, opens the film by jumping off the second tallest building in the world, the Merdeka 118 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Here she is describing to Jake Schreier how it felt taking that plunge.
That was insane! Absolutely mad. I don't know, you just have adrenaline and you're going right to the end of your fingertips and your toes. And my fingertips haven't stopped sweating. And probably neither have my feet, but it was amazing. And then you just hang there and you suddenly become very apparent of what's holding you and how it's only just a bit of fabric and some string. The standing up is the hardest because you have that sensation of possibly toppling over. And it feels like such an easy thing to do, standing up, going from sitting.
None of it looked easy. It looked amazing. You're crazy.
Amazing.
So much fun. I'm really happy that we did that. There's this nanosecond where you're like, okay, that's it.
Right, there's
Okay, I guess I made that decision. Well, because also, the moment you step to the edge, you have this, gust of wind that instantly also wakes up your body. So you're like, oh, I'm here. And then you still have to make the decision to step. It's amazing, though. It's amazing what your brain can do.
Yelena takes a big leap physically, but also emotionally. Forced to work together with an unlikely group of anti-heroes, director Jake Schreier describes how he saw their dynamic coming together.
I think, we're starting out, and I think maybe there's been some expectation. It's like they're going to be sent off on a mission to do bad things, and I think the great flip that was always in the script when I came on was that, in fact, they're all being sent to be gotten rid of, and that this space, which seems like a place for a fight, but actually you've got the grating and what turn out to be incinerators, this is really where they're being thrown away. And starting from the place where they're being thrown away and having to break out of that and find ways for people that are really have been individuals and locked in their own problems who don't trust each other because they've been sent to kill each other. How do they find a way to work together and find that in actuality there are aspects of their personalities that would make them maybe a terrible fit for any other part of society or for their parts of life, but a great fit together.
So who is responsible for accidentally assembling the Thunderbolts? Why, of course, it's the always unpredictable Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. If Valentina had a superpower, Julia has an idea of what it would be.
Her plan is to lure them in ostensibly to do a job for her, that is to say, getting rid of this agent or that agent. But what they don't know is that she's organizing for them to all off each other, but it doesn't work out quite the way she had hoped. And so she pivots once again. She's constantly pivoting. She's a pivoter. If that were a superhero strength, it would be pivoting.
Thunderbolts writer Joanna Kalo loves the idea that coming in as a viewer, we don't know who we should be rooting for.
The movie starts with a mission, and you don't fully understand
what this mission is or what's going on, which I love. I love that idea of kind of coming into the movie, not really knowing whose side we're supposed to be on. But what we discover is it's not a straight ahead mission. There isn't one good guy and one bad guy. In fact, Valentina has hired all of her agents that she's used on these illegal secretive missions to take each other out, and that it will erase all her problems and keep all of her secrets silent and lock all their dead bodies in this vault. But obviously what happens is they figure this out, and whether they want to or not, they have to join together to figure out how to survive.
One of the darker parts of the film is our introduction to the entity known as the Void. Joanna told us about what happens to Bob Reynolds, played by Lewis Pullman, when the Sentry Project goes awry.
I mean, I think the idea is that the Sentry Project is kind of using some of the super serum technology that we've seen in the past, but an advancement on that. But whatever's going on with Bob and his particular set of traumas and his particular brain chemistry, when this serum is used on him, it's off camera, but it's when the Sentry Project does to him, this is a completely strange effect, which is that in order to make him a superhero, he is incredibly strong, he's incredibly fast, he can fly, he also can disappear people into this massive growing void, which is what was inside of him. And when you go into the void, you go into what was in him, which is this shame space, which is your shame, your worst shames, the worst moments, and you feeling like you're responsible for them from your life being played on a loop over and over and over again. So that's what was inside Bob. And now as Void, as the Void, it's what happens to everyone else. And you go to your own particular set of shame rooms and live there for eternity in terrible misery. That's fun, right?
What was it like getting the chance to play Bob, Sentry, and the Void? Lewis Pullman explains how working with Jake Schreier helped him with character development.
It was a bit daunting to try and map out all of his characters, the whole spectrum of him, where he starts and where he ends, and how he kind of strobes back and forth. But luckily, Jake, had a very clear-cut idea of how we could kind of basically map it out in a more logical way. So it wasn't as kind of esoteric, and it was we knew what part of Bob or Sentry we were going to be playing on the day, and we mapped that out before we even started shooting. So that really was a huge relief, and to have him, as my compass every day. And then even on the day, still finding moments where it's like, we think we want to play it this way, but we don't know. In the edit, he might want a flash of Void Bob in this moment, or flashes here. And, you never know entirely until you get in the editing room how you kind of want to parcel out all the information, and you don't want to give away too much, and you want to sprinkle those breadcrumbs in an appropriate fashion.
And how about that fantastic Sentry costume? Costume designer Sonia Hayes dives into her creative process building the suit.
So Sentry is the brand new character. He very much, probably more than any other of these characters, resembles the comics. And the color gold comes from comics, and his blonde hair and all of this is very much like comics. It's all about the details. So we decided the whole suit is very, very stretchy. It's all made out of Euro, except for the hard parts that have been cast. But we printed the different parts in a different print so that it looks way more interesting and gives more detail, more depth to the costume. There was a lot of talk about the details of the seams and lines of the design and all of that, and the color used to this, choosing of the blue color, the belt, and all of these pieces were cast and added to the costume later after the costume was made. He has a blonde hair, even though Louis has a brown hair, so that turns around. And, we were very lucky to get Louis in it because the transformation from Bob to Sentry in his acting and in his walking is so dramatic that it's phenomenal.
With the amount of crazy plot twists in the film, there's just as many crazy action sequences. Visual effects supervisor Jake Morrison weighed in on planning that insane motorcycle car chase before shooting it in Utah.
So
Bucky basically takes out 3 Humvees and then the limo, and we have what is the most extraordinary thing that I think we're going to see, which is a limo flip, which I don't think anybody's ever seen, which is going to be really quite cool. There's a ton of rigs and stuff like that we'll have to go in to make that stuff happy. We'll be removing all that stuff as a matter of course. And then I'm sure we'll be augmenting some of the explosions, because we have to make sure that everything is safe for the stunt people who are doing the flips and the driving and the hops and all that stuff. So you're not going to be blowing up things left, right, and center with stunt people in there. So that falls upon us to help just augment that stuff to sort of heighten the action sequence, if nothing else.
How cool was it for Bucky to have his hero moment on a Harley bike? Sebastian says it made him feel nostalgic for Bucky's Winter Soldier days.
There were definitely moments that I had as Bucky in this that felt reminiscent of the other days, you know, the Winter Soldier days. And that was really fun for me to kind of like, you know, kind of wink at that. And I think we did a great job with that. And I think it was the motorcycle bit, and I'm really glad he let me keep the sunglasses. First of all, because there was just too much dust and there's just no way to keep your eyes open for it. But I think there's always been something with him that should feel a bit effortless and yet unpredictable. And I think some of those scenes were capturing that.
So what can audiences take away from Thunderbolts? According to Jake Schreier, fans are going to see a side of superheroes not usually shown.
I think it's probably clear from the first trailer that we're going for something different. I know everyone says that, but what I actually hope is that we take this different route to something that also succeeds on a level that you're very familiar with, because this isn't designed to be the weird one or the strange one or the different one. It's supposed to be like taking a different route towards heroism or towards teamwork or coming together that is about something emotionally resonant, which is about like the need for connection and togetherness. So we're not just committing to one path, and hopefully it adds up to something that works on both of those levels, where it is fun and it is very funny and humorous and has a lot of heart, but then maybe also leaves you thinking a little bit about some stuff you might not expect a superhero movie to make you think about, but just makes you think about, you know, what you're going through and what the people you know are going through also, and like if there's a way to kind of share that.
Marvel Studios Thunderbolts is now playing only in theaters. Victoria, I have been humming the entire soundtrack from Thunderbolts since the day that I saw it.
So what went into creating the music behind the action-packed film? Fellow official Marvel podcast host Anthony Carboni spoke with members of Son Lux, Ryan Lott, Rafiq Bhatia, and Ian Chang about what went into their musical process.
So excited to have Son Lux joining us now on the podcast. We got Ryan Lott, Rafiq Bhatia, and Ian Chang with us. Welcome, fellas.
Thanks, man. Super glad to be here. Nice to meet you. We're psyched.
You know, before we jump into everything about y'all, I do want to talk a little bit about sort of Thunderbolts and your sort of relationship to comics. Were y'all fans before you joined on?
Yeah, I was a Marvel fan, but I came to the project on the spectrum of things quite ignorant of most of it. But actually, I think that might be something that we brought to the project, which is a fresh perspective. But, you know, because it is such an incredibly beloved franchise, global franchise, it was an amazing honor to be invited to be a part and put our fingerprints on it, you know?
Yeah, Ian, can you tell us a little bit about how you guys got sort of involved with Thunderbolts?
We were really honored to hop on this project very early on, before anything was shot, you know, before there was an edit or anything like that. And Jake and us worked really closely together.
You're talking about Jake Schreier, the director of Marvel Studios Thunderbolts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say that Jake is a director that we all admire a lot, and is a director that Ryan worked with previously. And so there was already kind of a rapport and a relationship going into this. He was the one who kind of had the idea to hit us up and championed us and got us involved right from the get-go, which really gave us the opportunity to shape the sound of the film early on before anything was shot. which was really fun for us, and I think was a really nice thing for us to be able to explore themes and ideas and colors with Jake in a way that was establishing a mood and an aesthetic for the film. And Jake was always really excited to kind of tell us, for example, that like he played like some music that we wrote before the first table read for like the cast, and like would be playing ideas that we'd be sending him for actors before they would do a take on set.
And that's not common. That's not usually how it's done. The score is usually considered part of the post-production process, and to be actually part of the pre-production process is a rare privilege. And it was actually one of the things that when Jake approached us about doing this film, it was like sort of a yes, hell yes, but we want to have a formative influence. I mean, it's a little greedy, right? But we want to have a formative influence on this thing. Like, we don't want to just come up behind all of the creative decisions and chase a bunch of temp music. We want to be part of the DNA of this thing from the ground up.
So it sounds like you had, a lot more creative input from the beginning than you would in a film. How does that differ from sitting down to write an album? Rafiq, is there something that's different about the process when you get to come in so early?
I mean, it's interesting because this sort of pre-production versus post-production approach to scoring, you don't have like a specific scene in front of you where you're trying to catch the beats of what's happening on the picture. You're really armed more with like big picture concepts and ideas. And so in a certain way, it does feel more similar to the process of making a record. You're proceeding, and I think really with this script and this film and the way that Jake was talking about it, the emotional sort of core themes of the story were a big kind of thrust of what the music needed to be and represent. And that's not so dissimilar from the way that we might approach working with sound in a sculptural way as we do when we make a record and trying to like get it to have dimension and speak to something in our souls,
Yeah, and I will say one of our core principles procedurally as a band when we make a record is we record a lot of material early in the process. We record a lot of improvisation, just raw materials that once we've recorded, we stand back and we sift through the ideas and we discover the potential of those ideas in song form, which is kind of the opposite of the way most bands work. So we wind up with what we think are really vivid and creative ideas that we wouldn't have come about in a traditional way. So our thought was, could we take this principle of the process of how we work as a band in the context of making a record, and could we superimpose a bit of this process onto scoring, even though traditionally those things would be very antithetical? And that's what we did. We recorded orchestra in the traditional sense later in the final stages of the process, but we also did it very early, and we did a lot of sampling of the orchestra and of our raw ideas that we had already confirmed in this sort of pre-scoring process that would be significant parts of the DNA of the score. In that sense, I think we really had our cake and ate it too.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the, talking about some of the themes and the influences that you brought into Thunderbolts here. What sort of themes did you want to explore, and what sort of stuff did Jake say were sort of the themes of the movie that he wanted to hit on?
One of the great insights that Jake had early on was that themes, in a traditional sense, melodic themes, were going to be really important in the score. In particular, themes that in different contexts feel different. And so how could we find musical ideas that when cast in different lights really felt different? Because this movie does go places, unexpected places, and there's a broad spectrum of emotion in this movie. And on a strictly logistical level, we needed musical information that was going to be able to go to all of those different places and yet still feel like one movie.
Yeah. Were there specific challenges coming up with so many kind of thematic things for all of these different characters?
I think part of that challenge is like if you start to focus too much on individuals and less so on like the interplay between them and the sort of themes of their relationships to each other. I think that once we were able to sort of think about it more broadly in those terms, having fewer themes that speak more to principles in the film as opposed to individual characters is like the route that the score went. And I think it's probably better for it because it would have been quite confusing to do what you're describing.
Yeah, wow. So, okay, without going too deep into anything that would make y'all talk about spoilers or give anything away, if y'all have a favorite piece of music on the score, we won't give away any spoilers, but a piece that you're particularly proud of on the Thunderbolts soundtrack.
There is a cue that is called First Flight that I'm particularly proud of. Was something that was not scored to picture. It was a sort of like loose variation on some of the themes that we had established with Jake. Kind of after we established these themes, we went into a zone where we were just making tons of iterations of things, and this was one of them. And I have to give kudos and shout out to our excellent music editor on this project, Alex Levy, because this is one of those cases where like I wrote this piece of music with the film in mind. It wasn't for a particular scene or moment in the script. And the way this just slotted in to what happens on picture, and it's a pretty like big moment in the movie. I think like all three of us, when we first like saw it happen, we were just like, oh my God, like, woo! Yeah, that's it. That's perfect. And I'm just personally proud of the writing I got to do on that particular cue. It's like very orchestral writing, which is something that we're all kind of like in the nascent stages of like exploring how to work with a live orchestra and things like that. So it all ties into the memories of recording it as well at Abbey Road with the London Contemporary Orchestra, led by Hugh Brunt, and all, just, I can't explain to you like the feeling of like hearing a piece of music that you wrote like played by like 50 players in a room, just like absolutely crushing it. And it's unbelievable.
Y'all, and at Abbey Road too. Like, there must have been so many times during this whole thing you were like, "What?"
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal.
What a wild few years you guys must have been having. Is there anything that y'all want to say to the Marvel fans before you take off here?
Just thank you. Thank you for welcoming some outside energy and giving us room to discover new possibilities for ourselves. We've learned so much from working on this project, and we've discovered new things along the way that we've never had the kinds of resources or platforms to explore. And I think we're all just feeling really grateful right now.
Amen.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Anthony.
Ray, how are we feeling about robots these days?
I mean, as long as they're shorter than me, I feel like I'm okay with them.
They'd have to be significantly shorter, at least 1 foot, for me to be okay. And I'm pretty small, so
pocket size.
Yeah, exactly. Today, we're going to get to know the comic book history behind the cutest flying robot I can think of, H.E.R.B.I.E.
Now, the Marvel Comics universe has no shortage of androids, synthezoids, and other, oids, but few are as adorable as the Fantastic Four's resident robot, H.E.R.B.I.E. With his old school computer monitor head flashing enormous round eyes, H.E.R.B.I.E. is more reminiscent of a late 90s virtual pet than a heroic super droid.
That might be because H.E.R.B.I.E. is also one of the first Marvel characters to be brought into the comics universe after originating somewhere else, namely the 1978 Saturday morning cartoon series, The New Fantastic Four.
But for now, we're just going to focus on the H.E.R.B.I.E. we know from Marvel Comics. So let's travel back in time to when our emoticon face friend was first invented by the FF's Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards. So the Fantastic Four, which along with Reed, consists of Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and Ben Grimm, the rocky orange powerhouse known as The Thing, are on a mission. They need to track down the world-devouring cosmic being Galactus. But Galactus could literally be anywhere in the universe, or possibly even a different universe. So Reed Richards needed a highly engineered robot built for interdimensional exploration.
A highly engineered robot built for interdimensional exploration?
Yes, a highly engineered robot built for interdimensional exploration.
It almost sounds like the first letters of those words could spell something out.
Victoria, you are so smart. So it does indeed. Reed Richards created the Humanoid Experimental Robot B-Type Integrated Electronics, or H.E.R.B.I.E.
Wait, hold on. What?
Yeah, sorry. So that's just one of his names. H.E.R.B.I.E really prefers highly engineered robot built for interdimensional exploration.
So H.E.R.B.I.E's name isn't just one long-winded acronym, it's two.
I mean, he's a robot, but he's also a diva. So Reed builds H.E.R.B.I.E to help them track down Galactus, and just for fun, he bases his design on the cute little robot buddy from the Fantastic Four cartoon. And stick with me here, because yes, the Fantastic Four cartoon also exists within the Marvel Comics universe.
I love that for them. That is the coolest thing that I have heard about the Fantastic Four.
They have their own cartoon.
Yes. And while H.E.R.B.I.E's initial purpose is as an interstellar navigator, the little guy comes equipped with the ability to do a lot more than fly spaceships. He can fly on his own, for one thing, and hover in place, and interface with just about any computer. He comes equipped with fire extinguishers, infrared scanners, and potentially deadly laser beams. His metallic tendril arms are capable of extending and retracting, not to mention coiling and crushing, and H.E.R.B.I.E is strong enough to knock the thing flat on his face, which he literally does the first time the two meet.
But here's where things go dreadfully wrong. As it turns out, a supervillain named Dr. Son had been secretly present at H.E.R.B.I.E's creation, or at least his mind was. See, Dr. Son is just a living brain that can transfer its consciousness into computers and other tech devices, and he implanted himself into H.E.R.B.I.'s AI brain, allowing him to take control of the little robot whenever he wants to.
Of course, the FF doesn't know this, which is why H.E.R.B.I.E totally freaks them out from time to time by doing something incredibly reckless that puts lives in danger, or by using lethal force on an enemy. Eventually, once the team is back on Earth, in their headquarters in New York's Baxter Building, Dr. Son launches an all-out assault to kill the Fantastic Four. And by interfacing with the Baxter Building's computers and turning the FF's own defense system against them, he almost does it.
But Dr. Son goes one step too far. He decides he'll be more powerful if he transfers his consciousness into the Baxter Building's computer system and takes over the entire facility.
That frees H.E.R.B.I.E of Son's influence, and in a true tearjerker moment, H.E.R.B.I.E sacrifices himself, crashing himself at top speed into the computer that houses Dr. Son's mind, causing an explosion that destroys them both.
Now that sounds tragic, right, Victoria?
Of course, truly.
But, you know, H.E.R.B.I.E's a robot, and this is the comics world, so he just gets rebuilt. Actually, he gets built and rebuilt many times over the years, and the Fantastic Four puts him to good use in just about every single way they can think of. I mean, lab assistant, mechanic, security guard, scout, repairman, and perhaps most frequently, babysitter. Reed and Sue Richards regularly leave their children, Franklin and Valeria, in the care of their mecha nanny.
Can you blame them? Working parents, you know?
In this day and age.
I would also love a nandroid.
Ooh, yeah, a nanny android.
Anyway, year after year, H.E.R.B.I.E performs all these roles cheerily and without complaint. Although we eventually learn that perhaps that's only because he couldn't complain. Okay, so now we're at a point in Marvel history where Tony Stark has been replaced as Iron Man by his, shall we say, troubled brother Arno. And Arno Stark has a major beef against artificial intelligence. With the help of an evil tech company, this new Iron Man goes on a campaign to either destroy or take control of every computerized mind on the planet. This, of course, does not sit well with the Marvel Universe's many robotic inhabitants, and a large faction of them become activists fighting for robot rights. Some resort to outright rebellion. Cut back to Fantastic Four's headquarters, where young genius Valeria Richards hears the news of the robot revolution and decides that, ethically, H.E.R.B.I.E deserves to be free. She rewires her robo-babysitter, removing his inhibitor chip and giving him free will for the first time in his life.
And what does H.E.R.B.I.E do with that taste of free will? Well, he laces into the Fantastic Four with a stream of obscenities that would make even Deadpool blush, and then flies off into the sunset.
H.E.R.B.I.E does not waste that newfound freedom, though. He really does join the robot revolution, the AI army that Tony Stark puts together to fight his increasingly out-of-control brother. And H.E.R.B.I.E plays a pivotal role in the ultimate defeat of Arno Stark and the future protection of robot rights.
That is quite the resume for one tiny little robot.
On this day in 1991, a simple snap of Thanos' fingers changed Marvel Comics history as we knew it. Leading up to the events of the Infinity Gauntlet series, Thanos goes on a quest to collect all 6 Infinity Gems so he can, as he puts it, quote-unquote, restore balance to the universe. Or, wipe out half of the existing population. In Infinity Gauntlet number 1, written by Jim Starlin, Thanos achieves his aim with a singular iconic snap, setting into motion a mighty fight across the universe led by what is left of Earth's superheroes. With members of the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and more erased from existence, the patchwork team of heroes that remains on Earth attempts to lead the battle against Thanos. This unlikely team-up includes Captain America, Thor, Adam Warlock, Hulk, Quasar, Silver Surfer, Nebula, the Human Torch, Doctor Strange, and the Watchers. Our heroes suffer many defeats, and the odds seem impossible, but finally there is hope. Nebula agrees to betray her father, and they are able to outwit Thanos. Adam Warlock gets his hands on the gauntlet, returns it to Earth, and the universe goes back to the way it was before. The Infinity Gauntlet run has made a massive impact on pop culture. Even decades after its release, it was so successful that it spawned 2 sequel comic series, 1992's The Infinity War and 1993's The Infinity Crusade. It has inspired toys, video games, and was later adapted for the big screen, starring actor Josh Brolin as Thanos, which culminated in Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame, immortalizing the storyline forever in Marvel's Infinity Saga. Perhaps Thanos said it best himself. In the end, as always, Thanos will stand triumphant.
Next week on the official Marvel podcast, we're talking about the legacy of the Fantastic Four in Marvel Comics with some of the first family's most illustrious creators, Mark Waid, Chip Zdarsky, Jonathan Hickman, and Ryan North.
They are the most functional family in the Marvel Universe. They were the first comic characters really to act more like real human beings with real problems.
That's it for this episode. If you haven't already, make sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening. It helps other Marvel fans find the show.
Yes, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode.
This episode was hosted by Ray Lowe and myself, Victoria Yang.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Zachary Goldberg.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening. See you all next week.